Hare Krishna, welcome back to our Bhakti Yoga journeys. In the series of talks, we've been discussing various episodes from the Bhagavad Puran. So today we have a very, very special discussion. So today is also a very special occasion in the Vedic almanac. Today is the Tithi, the very special day of Mahashivratri. So today I thought we'll discuss a very special verse from the Bhagavad Puran. And we will try to center our discussion around understanding Lord Shiva, the Shiva Tattva, some very special features about Lord Shiva, what makes him so interesting, what makes him so special, and what makes him so divine. So that's going to be the whole theme of today's discussion. So I'm going to share my screen and we are going to discuss this very interesting verse. So if you can see the verse now. So this is a verse from the 8th canto of the Bhagavad Puran, 16th chapter. And this verse, it glorifies 5 very, very special characteristics of Lord Shiva. So that's going to be the theme of our discussion today. So we'll try to see what are those 5 unique features about Lord Shiva. So this is how the verse goes. Namah Shivaya Rudraya Namah Shaktidharaya Cha Sarva Vidyadi Pataye Bhutanam Pataye Namaha. Translation: I offer my respectful obeisances unto you, Lord Shiva or Rudra, who are the reservoir of all potencies, the reservoir of all knowledge, and the master of everyone. Short and sweet purport, Srila Prabhupada writes, it is a system for one to offer obeisances unto the expansion or incarnation of the Lord. Lord Shiva is an incarnation of the tamogun of the material modes of nature, the ignorance of the material modes of nature. So Prabhupada just leaves it here. So we'll try to unpack what exactly Prabhupada is talking about here. What does this verse talk about, right? So the verse, it begins with offering respects. Namah Shivaya. So Shiva is the Tattva, the Shiva, Lord Shiva. He's a very, very interesting personality. If you go back to our discussion when we discussed the different kinds of avatars, in that discussion we spoke about how Lord Shiva is a special Gunavatara. As Prabhupada also spoke about this Gunavatara, the Tamogun is controlled by Lord Shiva. So he takes care of that particular aspect of creation of this physical world. So while Lord Shiva as a Gunavatara is a more functional explanation of Lord Shiva, there is a more deeper understanding to the ontology, the tattva behind Lord Shiva. Now, broadly speaking, the different kinds of entities that exist can be broadly categorized into 2. In Sanskritam, the words used are Swamsha and Vibhinnamsha. Swa-amsha. Swa-amsha means the Lord and his expansion. So all the avatars that we saw in that list, the different kinds of avatars, they all come in that category. Sometimes they're just simply the one term that is used to represent the Swamshas are Vishnu Tattvas. Or in other words, these are all the divine sentient entities. So all Lord Rama, Narsimha, they all come. And of course, in that chapter, we also discuss how Krishna, Ete Chamsa Kalapumsam, Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. He is the original avatari who takes these avatars, right? So that is one category. They are called as Vishnu Tattvas. Then the Vibhinnamshas are separated sentient beings. That's basically all of us, the living entities, right? They are also called as Jiva Tattvas. So if you recall our discussion in the YTTC, when we discussed about the Gita, the triangle, we spoke about how broadly there is this Ishvara Tattva or Vishnu Tattvas, and there are Jiva Tattvas. Interestingly, Lord Shiva, he doesn't fit into either of these categories. Technically, he is not Ishvara Tattva. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. But he's also not a Jiva Tattva. He's a unique category in itself called as Shiva Tattva. That's a third category, which is neither you can say 100% spiritual, nor is it, bound like how ordinary conditioned souls are, right? So this is a very, very unique understanding. So the Brahma Samhita very beautifully describes this technical difference between the Vishnu Tattvas and Shiva Tattvas. It gives the example of how milk, when it transforms to yogurt, technically milk and yogurt, you will find both of them in the dairy section of a supermarket. They both are practically the same category of foods. But still, milk exactly is not yogurt. Milk can transform to yogurt, but yogurt cannot transform back into milk, right? Which means if milk is compared to Vishnu Tattvas, yogurt is that Shiva Tattva. So in a sense, there is a causation, there's a cause and effect. Milk and yogurt, there's a connection of cause and effect there, but it's not a reverse cause. Like, for example, you cannot just say milk and say milkshake, right? Technically, they are same category. So that would be like, the different, the Swamshas, the Prakashas, Lila Avataras, all that we discussed. It's like different milk and different flavors of milkshake. But yogurt is something very, very different. So Lord Shiva is something like that. Why? What is it that mutates, that converts milk into yogurt? When there is addition of little culture, where there is addition of little bacteria, when the lactobacteria, when it converts, processes milk, it converts into yogurt. Which means when the Vishnu Tattva, when it comes, what is this bacteria? What is this little contamination? Is when the Supreme Divine comes in very close contact with Prakriti, with material energy, that very, very unique form, which is not material, which is not conditioned, which is not even fully pure. That very, very unique in-between state is the Shiva Tattva. And that's why you will see in Vedic iconography, in the Vedic stories and Puranic pastimes, Lord Shiva, he's always represented as the consort of Devi, of Durga, of Parvati. Parvati, she is the embodiment of this material energy. And Shiva comes in close contact with her as the husband, right? So, and it is this Shiva and Parvati's union that literally causes this whole material energy to start flowing, right? And that very, very special form of Lord Shiva, where he comes in contact with Prakriti, is the form of time, Kala. Lord Shiva, another way in which he is worshipped as Mahakaleshwar, as that time which is present inside this material world. It is this time that interacts with Prakriti and causes transformation of material energy. Unless time does not act, material energy is in a kind of a hibernated mode, right? There's no movement happening. Visualize, if I were to remove time suddenly from the room where you're sitting, everything would be standstill. Even the electrons around the nuclei will stop rotating. Everything would be frozen. The earth will stop rotating around the planets. It's like everything is in a pause state, like you pause a movie frame, right? What time does? Time is that energy that stirs things into motion, causing transformations in Prakriti, in material energy. So that very, very unique form of the Supreme Lord that comes in direct contact with material energy, not as the remote cause, but as the very direct, immediate cause, right? So because Lord Shiva, time is that instrumental cause in the hand of the ultimate cause, coming in contact with the material cause. Remember your first class in YTTC, the different causation theory that we discussed, right? So it is that intermediate cause, that is Lord Shiva, the immediate cause, who's the efficient cause, who's coming in contact with material energy. And that's what makes Lord Shiva so special. And more so, what makes him even more special, the very meaning of the word, of the name Shiva, means all auspicious. Now you may be wondering, hey, just now you spoke Vishnu Tattva, when it comes in contact, when it's contaminated by material energy, that's a Shiva Tattva. Then why the name all auspicious to Shiva? Because Lord Shiva is teaching a very, very important lesson as spiritualists. How? we need to be of this world to be functional, but at the same time, in our consciousness, we need to be OFF, of this world, aloof from this world. So this very, very unique characteristic only Lord Shiva exhibits. How he's in close contact with Parvati, with material energy personified, and yet he's completely unaffected by her. As a service of to run the show of this material world, Lord Shiva takes that very, very unique service, but he is completely detached. Something we'll talk about it later also, right? So this is very, very unique position of Lord Shiva. So in that way, if you look at from the perspective from inside the pot of this, inside this material world, right? Imagine this whole world with this one gigantic container, and Prakriti is there everywhere. So that the closest form of divinity that is present in this world, running the show of this world, is Lord Shiva. So that is why sometimes when the Vedas describe Lord Shiva as a supreme Lord, there is no confusion about it. Or many times people, they get confused when they're new to the Vedic science, not even new actually, even seasoned Vedic readers, they get confused about Vishnu, Shiva, and usually our material concept of higher, lower, these paradigms, they come in, right? But it is not like that. So just think of Vishnu as somebody who's aloof from Prakriti, whereas Shiva as that form of divine who's in close contact with Prakriti. So because we are very much in Prakriti right now, the closest form of divinity we have access to is Lord Shiva, right? So that is what makes him so special. So the best way to worship Lord Shiva is by learning this very, very unique quality about him, that how we need to belong to this world. We need to engage with this world, but in a very, very dispassionate, detached way, not while our body is interacting with this world, our consciousness should remain aloof from this world. That is the very unique feature that Lord Shiva teaches all of us, right? The second aspect, the second name of Lord Shiva that is being spoken here is that of Rudraya. Rudra, usually when Lord Shiva is doing his cosmic dance of destruction, then he is referred to as this Rudra potency, right? And yeah, I think somebody's mic is on. Maybe you can mute yourself. Yeah, there you go. Yeah. So Rudra, as I was saying, he is that the cosmic destroyer. And whenever we hear the word destruction, and also we studied, right, Lord Shiva as the master of this tamogun, as a gunavatara, his role is the cosmic destruction. While Brahma does the creation, Vishnu does the maintenance, Shiva does the destruction. We heard this many times. And destruction sounds very destructive to us, right? So why is Lord Shiva doing that? Because we need to understand destruction is a very, very important aspect of creation. This is how beautifully Lord Shiva harmonizes the opposites. If you think about it, without destruction, there cannot be creation. Without destroying the toxicity within us, we cannot create space for positivity. Without destroying the old and redundant things in our life, we cannot pave way for the new things. For every new beginning, there has to be one painful ending. And this is one very, very beautiful, this is what Lord Shiva embodies. How beautifully, actually, if you think about it, Lord Shiva, while the first Lord Shiva attribute of Lord Shiva shows how he's so special, as Rudra, it symbolizes how he is a perfect harmonizer. Even destruction can be harmoniously utilized for the sake of creation. These two, they may seem like polar opposites, creation and destruction, but both cannot exist without each other. Without a creation, there cannot be anything to destroy. And without anything to destroy, you cannot create again. right? So this is the unique harmonizing factor. And Lord Shiva, not just Lord Shiva, his entire family, if you think about it, they are an embodiment of harmony, right? Look at his two kids. Lord Ganesha, he is symbol of intelligence, right? And usually when there is lot of intelligence, uh, when there's lot of gyan involved, there will not be much action there, right? So usually, the extremely smart people like to be very lazy. And exact polar opposite, his second son, Kartikeya, he is the leader of the army of the Devatas, and he's always in action, right? Two polar opposites, the wisdom of knowledge and the energy of action. Both are happily living together. And usually, we take decisions in our lives based on our worldview. Imagine you have a room with these two polar opposites. One person believes in just silently sitting and thinking. Other person believes in let's act, right? And yet this family lives in perfect harmony, right? Uh, Another example within their own family. Lord Shiva, what does he carry around his neck? If you've seen, he wears a serpent around his neck, and the serpent, it also represents the time factor, time that with its one bite will end everything, right? And at the same time, who is Ganesha's vehicle? Lord Ganesha, his vehicle, his vahan is a mouse, which are natural predators. Snake and mouse are natural predators, yet they live harmoniously in one house. Lord Shiva's own vahan, his own vehicle, is a bull, Nandi. And Durga's vehicle is a lion. Again, natural predators. And yet, they both live harmoniously. Again, snake, which I mentioned about. Lord Kartikeya's vahan is a peacock. Peacock and snake are natural rivals. And yet, their entire family, if you think about it, it's like a perfect recipe for disaster. And yet, they live in perfect harmony because that's the speciality of Lord Shiva as Rudra. He's a perfect harmonizer, right? And this is what makes this is another very, very important feature, that lesson that we can learn from Lord Shiva, that how many times we become very polarized in our thought process, perhaps due to our past experiences or maybe certain worldviews that have been imposed upon us. But a spiritualist learns to harmonize, learning to see that one higher truth in every aspect of reality. And because Lord Shiva is in that absorbed state of consciousness, he was able to ensure that his entire family also maintains that state of consciousness, right? In fact, in India, it's a very common practice for young unmarried girls to worship Lord Shiva, because Lord Shiva, he's the ideal husband. Because he perfectly harmonizes everything. There can be no conflicts in the house, when the husband is spiritually minded. So Lord Shiva is an ideal example. So Prabhupada in one purport, he writes that how even in today, there's a custom that how young girls, they worship Lord Shiva, aspiring to get a nice devoted husband like him, like that. And the opposite also true. The young boys, they pray to Devi, to Gauri, Lord Shiva's wife, to get a suitable partner. So the point here is that how, because Lord Shiva is so spiritually minded, he is able to harmonize things. Even something so something so powerful like destruction can also be utilized in the bigger plan of this creation. The third attribute of Lord Shiva being discussed here is Namaha Shakti Dharaya. And this is a very, very powerful principle. Shakti Dhara. Shakti Dharaya means how? Dhara means to hold. And he is holding the Shakti. He is holding all, proper transit, the reservoir of all potencies. So Shakti is goddess Parvati. And Shakti Dhara, he is the holder of Devi, of the divine goddess. And, or in other words, as we discussed, he's the holder of this material energy. And if you think about it, this is one of the most challenging things to do, because there's a very, very special form of Lord Shiva known as Ardha Narishwara. Ardha, half, Nari, woman, Ishwara, the masculine. So there's this very special form where Lord Shiva and Parvati, they combine into one form, where the left part of the body, which is the even in our understanding, the yogic understanding, the left part of our body is the feminine side. So on the left side is Mother Parvati, half of Mother Parvati's body, and on the right side, which is the masculine side, is Lord Shiva. And this is a very, very unique form that talks about how, as spiritualists, we need to balance our masculine and feminine energies. Lord Shiva is a perfect, as Shakti Dharaya, he is teaching this very, very important aspect of balancing our rational and emotional facilities, our cognitive and emotive faculties. Even Patanjali in the Yoga Sutras, when he defines what is yoga, or what should be the ideal characteristics of yoga, he talks about these two aspects of abhyasa and vairagya, of cognitive training and emotive balance or emotional training. And this balanced approach is what ensures that our spirituality is in a sustained path. Many times we approach spirituality as just a very cognitive process where you learn some new things, you start adopting certain lifestyle, you master certain shlokas and some philosophy, right? While all that is important, it's also important to nourish, balance, and train our emotions. And that is what the Shakti Dhara, balancing masculine and feminine aspects, because they cannot exist independently. You cannot have purely masculine or purely feminine. If you look at the whole world, how it is only the combination of this masculine and feminine energies which causes the whole world to function, right? Both literally and metaphorically. Therefore, in the Vedic culture, how these two energies need to be balanced. Yes, for men, there may have a more dominant masculine side, but then the dormant feminine side also needs to be harnessed and balanced. And likewise for women, yes, the dominant energy may be the feminine energy, but at the same time, the dormant masculine energy also needs to be balanced. So if you think about it, therefore, this how traditionally, at least, one of the important art forms, or one of the important, you can say, physical exercises that women would take up to is dance. Believe it or not, yoga for a very, very long time was mainly the physical exercise or physical expression for men. Because in yoga, there is a lot of exercising of masculine energy. So in yoga, if you see, especially in the asanas, especially in the ashtanga and the very intense hatha kind of practices, the masculine energy is in the foreground, but in the movements there is grace. So the grace, which is the feminine aspect, is in the background. Whereas in dance, the aesthetics, the grace is in the foreground, but it takes a lot of energy to dance. Don't think that dancing is just some movement of the body. But a professional dancer, their workout is more intense, like the 108 Surya Namaskaras that we do in our course, right? So it takes a lot of strength to be a dancer. But the strength aspect is in the background, but the poise, the grace, how they carry themselves, that comes in the foreground, right? So this, but irrespective of that, how the Vedic culture emphasized how through yoga or through dance, both men and women need to balance both their masculine and feminine energies, right? So that is why, if you when if you think about it, in this world, Vishnu and Lakshmi, they are too ideal. I mean, if you think about it, what is Lord Vishnu doing? He's just happily, sleeping in Yoga Nidra. And Mother Lakshmi, she is not even involved in his activity. Because when Vishnu wants to create, he creates on his own. I mean, from his navel pops the lotus and Brahma is born. So Vishnu doesn't even need Lakshmi to create his own child. He is so fully potent, he can do things on his own, right? So that way, Vishnu and Lakshmi as a couple are a little too ideal. But a more practical, couple to look up to is Shiva and Parvati, because they have to deal with each other, right? And how perfectly, as we discussed, that through this balance, through this harmonizing aspect, and how uh, Lord Shiva, he is this as an ideal spiritualist. He is balancing, he's teaching us how to balance as Ardhanarishwara. He's balancing both the masculine and feminine energies, right? So that is what, in fact, this special night tonight, the Mahashivratri, it is celebrated in the Vedic understanding. This is the day of the union of this Shiva and Shakti, of Shiva and Parvati. And that's why it is celebrated as, this is the day when, the divine masculine and feminine energies are coming in contact. This is something auspicious for the whole world. Because if these two energies don't come together, the masculine energy or the Shiva Tattva, Shiva energy is like the potential energy. And Shakti is like the kinetic energy, the energy in motion. If the masculine energy is the energy in potential, the feminine energy is energy in motion. And when these two come together, that's when the whole show of creation continues. Right? As long as they are isolated, it creates an imbalance. Right? So that is why, if you see in the Vedic culture, when somebody is aspiring only for masculine energy, like how Surpanaka was interested only in Lord Ram, that is one kind of a demoniac mentality. Or when somebody is only aspiring for feminine energy, like how Ravan was wanting to steal Sita away from Lord Ram. So these are all demoniac mentalities. And that's why you will see, when we over focus on just one of these energies, it drains us over a period of time. It is very difficult to sustain our both. Even in spirituality also it happens. Sometimes people get too masculine in their spiritual practice, right? So the container to balance this masculine energy is a feminine energy. And therefore, without a balance of these two, we cannot have sustained spiritual practice. And as Namah Shakti Dharaya, Lord Shiva is emphasizing this, how he is showing this, that how he is perfectly balancing these energies. As a reservoir of all potencies, he is perfectly balancing all these energies. And then the next characteristic being spoken of, Sarva Vidyatipate. So the first characteristic we saw, how Lord Shiva is so special, unique characteristic, unique tattva, Shiva tattva. As Rudra, we saw him as the harmonizer. As Shakti Dharaya, we saw how he is the ideal spiritualist, learning to balance things. And the fourth aspect we will now see is as Sarva Vidyadipati. Vidya means knowledge. And Lord Shiva, he has a very, very special form, especially in southern part of India. There's a very special form of Lord Shiva worshipped as Lord Dakshinamurti. It's a long story. I'll just give you an essence. So this one time, the four Kumaras, they wanted to actually have a debate with Lord Shiva, or with the intention to understand some deeper topic. So Lord Shiva, he was sitting under this tree, and he was facing in the southern direction. So usually the direction of north is seen where Himalayas are, is seen as a sign of wisdom. So usually when you are learning, when a teacher is teaching, they like to face towards north. But interestingly here, Lord Shiva is facing in the opposite direction. So the four Kumaras go there, and Lord Shiva is also sitting in a very, very unique, interesting position. He's sitting on a seat, and with his right leg, right foot resting on his left knee, and in his right hand, he is in this Chin Mudra, right? And while sitting like that, Lord Shiva was closing his eyes, and he didn't utter a single word. But the four Kumaras, just sitting in the presence of Lord Shiva, all their questions got clarified. It was like, it was not telepathy, it was not some sign language, nothing. Just being in the aura of this form of the Lord, of Lord Shiva as Dakshinamurti, the Lord who's facing the southern. Dakshina also means south direction. As a Lord who's facing the southern direction, who is the embodiment of all this knowledge. So Lord Dakshinamurti, he is seen as Lord Shiva as a great master, as a great teacher. In fact, even in many yoga traditions also, Lord Dakshinamurti is worshipped because he's also the master of yoga, he's master of all knowledge. Even students, they worship Lord Shiva as Dakshinamurti so that they become smart and get good scores in their exams. Sound a little materialistic, but yeah, but basically he is the Sarva Vidyadhipate. He's a reservoir. Adhipati means like the commander of all this knowledge as Dakshinamurti. So Lord Shiva, he is, if one of the best things that you can approach Lord Shiva for is for the science of self-realization. Because Lord Shiva, he himself embodies this. Because with knowledge naturally comes detachment or vairagya. Right? Vidya and vairagya are very closely connected. And that connection between vidya and vairagya, between knowledge and detachment, is humility. Because when that is also another word starting with V, in Sanskritam it is called as Vinaya. Vidya, Vinaya, and Vairagya. Knowledge, humility, and detachment, they come as this one integrated package. You cannot have one without other. You cannot have pure knowledge. If you have only knowledge, very soon you will become proud. Right? And when you have humility, naturally detachment will come. You cannot have detachment without humility also. And so many episodes where Lord Shiva exhibited this. One very, very famous episode. This one time, Lord Shiva's own father-in-law, that is father of Sati Devi, Lord Shiva's wife, Daksha, when one day he walked into this big grand assembly, all the heavenly citizens, all the devatas, they were all sitting there in that assembly. Brahmaji was there, right? And then as soon as Daksha walked in, and Daksha was a very, very empowered personality. He had the aura of a highly empowered person. In fact, the very meaning of the word Daksha means expert. He was very, very expert in the creation process. So as soon as he walked in, everybody stood up out of respect. So why in the Vedic culture we respect others? In fact, the word namaha is used. Namaha means na mama, not me. Meaning that we all carry so much of ego, right? So when you say namaha, means says I am not acknowledging my ego. I acknowledge you. So see, every word, hello has what philosophical meaning does the word hello have? I don't know, it sounds like hell actually. Half of hell is there in hello. Or no, 3/4 of hell is there in hello. No, whole of hell, right? Yeah. Hell, oh, right? It's almost like saying, hey, go to hell, right? There's not much philosophy or not much auspiciousness in the addressing of hello. But in the Vedic culture, you see namaha. When you say namaste, namaha, it basically says, oh, showing that, hey, there is the Supreme Lord present within you. I acknowledge the divinity within you by keeping my ego aside. That's literally what the gesture, this hand gesture of namaste gesture and the address namaste or namaha means. That, I'm keeping my ego aside. So the whole idea of acknowledging somebody, of respecting somebody, is to acknowledge the divinity within their heart, to acknowledge that Supreme Lord is present as Paramatma within your heart. I therefore keep my ego aside and respect the Paramatma within you. So when Daksha walked in, everybody stood up. But Lord Shiva, because he was already in this, though he was sitting in an assembly, he was already in a very deep state of samadhi. He was already worshipping the Supreme Lord within his head. So when Daksha walked in, he did not notice him. And the whole point of doing namaste is so that you worship the Supreme Lord. within the heart of the other person. Here is Lord Shiva in Samadhi directly worshipping the Supreme Lord. So there was no need for him to get up and acknowledge. He was fulfilling the purpose of Namaste by being in Samadhi. But Daksha took it as a personal insult, because Daksha, though he was expert in his material skills, he was not very spiritually advanced. Consequently, he took it as a personal offense that, hey, look, everybody stood up except Shiva because he's too proud. And immediately Lord Shiva hurls abuses towards Lord Shiva. But Lord Shiva, being the embodiment of knowledge, humility, and detachment, very simply, without even, usually when somebody insults us, we have an urge to defend ourselves because that comes from our ego. How can they call me something which I am not? Right? Your ego immediately starts protesting. But Lord Shiva, he is beyond ego. He is beyond Mahat. He has control. He's a master of ego. He has already controlled it. Therefore, very humbly, he just turns around and walks out of that assembly. Right? So, like that. So, and that's why you will see Lord Shiva. What is it? One common posture in which you will see Lord Shiva in all his photographs, all his paintings. You'll see he's always sitting in meditation. Right? Because that's what knowledge, humility, and detachment allows us to access those deeper inner states of awareness, those deeper meditative states. Therefore, Lord Shiva, you will see he's the Adi Yogi, he's the perfect yogi, because this knowledge and detachment, knowledge, humility, and detachment, they ultimately, you cannot cultivate them, rather they are the product of devotion. So Sarva Vidyatipate, by acknowledging Lord Shiva as a reservoir of all knowledge, as a master of all Vedas, what does it mean? He has understood the conclusion of Vedas. As Lord Krishna explains in Bhagavad Gita, Vedesha Sarver Ahameva Vedyo. The whole essence of studying the Vedas is to ultimately understand me, Krishna, and worship me. And Lord Shiva, as the master of all the wisdom, knowledge, and as the embodiment of humility and detachment, he was doing that. He was exhibiting that. He always exhibits that characteristic. In the deep state of meditation, he is worshipping Lord Sankarshana, who's one of the expansions of Lord Krishna. And Lord Shiva, you cannot find a person more detached than Lord Shiva. So this one time, Mother Parvati, she makes a humble appeal to Lord Shiva, because if you see, where are Shiva and Parvati residing? They are residing in Mount Kailash, and usually sitting under a tree, sitting on a rock. They don't have any house, they don't have a palace, nothing. They just live in the open, right? So one day Mother Parvati, she asks, why don't we have a nice house? So Lord Shiva says, why do you want? We are happy here. Why do you want one more house? So he says, no, it will be nice if we have a house. We are grihastas. Grihasta means griha. Griha means a house. We are householders. So we need to have a house to call ourselves as householders. So Lord Shiva says, okay, fine. So with his power, he creates a house. Then he said, okay, let's go live in the house. He says, hey, we can't just randomly just go into the house. The Vedic system says whenever there's a house warming ceremony. Today we call it house warming ceremony, but technically it's called as griha pravesha. When you enter into a house, you create auspiciousness in the house by doing certain worship, certain puja, certain rituals. So he says we'll have to do one of those, ceremonies, house warming ceremonies before we do that. Okay, then how do we do that? Because traditionally you would invite some priests, some brahmanas, and they will do some yajna in the house, and blah, blah, blah. They'll sanctify the house, and that's how we enter into the house. He says, okay, good. So then Lord Shiva calls some brahmanas. He says, okay, this is my new house, and I want you to do the ceremony. So they do the ceremony, blah, 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 everything done. So then they entered the house. Then Mother Parvati says, hey, we can't just enter into the house like that. You just invited those brahmanas, and you have to, the Vedic culture says that whenever you take service from a priest, you need to give something as remuneration. Whatever you can afford, you can just give some remuneration. So immediately the priests are standing there waiting for remuneration. So Lord Shiva, he's the greatest Vairagi. He doesn't have any money, nothing. The only possession he had at that point was that house. He says, okay, I donate this house to you. Please take it away. So they are back under a tree. So this is the Vairagya. This is the detachment Lord Shiva has, right? So, of course, we cannot fake this. We cannot imitate this, right? This detachment, as I said, is a product of very, very advanced, mature state of devotion, where such a person does not feel the need for anything external for their sense of self-worth, for their sense of being, well-being, because they are so deeply internally connected to this greatest reservoir of pleasure, to the bhakti, to the joy of devotional service, that they don't feel the need for anything else. In fact, all the joys of things of this world just fade away as a pale background somewhere in front of the joy, the inner joy that they are experiencing. So Lord Shiva, as Dakshinamurti, he's the embodiment of that knowledge as a great, and that knowledge, Vidya, leading to Vairagya. Yeah, he is exhibiting how he is, that such a great devotee who has mastered his ego. And the last part is perhaps the most relevant part for all of us. The last name of Lord Shiva as Bhutanam Pataye Namaha. Bhuta means all living entities. Pataye as master. Namaha. So, Lord Shiva is the most important. He is perhaps the greatest form of altruism that you will see is in Lord Shiva. There cannot be anybody more altruistic, because only the greatest devotee can be altruistic. Altruistic means who cares for everyone. For most of us, even the worldly altruism we see, somewhere there is some biases. We are altruistic to only humans, right? Or we are altruistic to maybe to all the people in just my country. Though we call it altruistic, it violates the very definition of altruism. But most of altruistic activities, all these people that you see who claim themselves to be altruistic, they uh, they all have their own agendas. They have their own biases in terms of how they are being altruistic, how they're being kind to other people. But Lord Shiva, he has no biases. He is compassion personified. In fact, Lord Shiva, Bhutanam Pate, he is concerned about every single entity of this world, not just the sattvic living entities, even the tamasic entities like ghosts and hobgoblins, and in fact, nice story. This I think comes in the Padma Puran, where one time Lord Mother Parvati, she asks Lord Shiva that what are the characteristics of a Pashandi? Pashandi means one who is spiritually averse, who's an atheist, that kind of a person, like a highly materially absorbed person. So Lord Shiva says, oh, such a person, they uh, they wear a garland of skulls and they smear themselves with ashes. They do a bogus claim of spirituality, and they think they disregard the position of Lord Vishnu and equate everybody to Lord Vishnu, saying everybody is God, all the devatas are gods, and he gives a whole list of characters of Pashandis. After the whole explanation, Mother Parvati very humbly, she says, my Lord, please don't mind my question, but I have one doubt. You mentioned these Pashandis, these spiritually averse people, they wear garlands of skulls and smear themselves with ashes, and they're always, isn't that what you are doing? Because if you see Lord Shiva, Kapala, he's wearing this garland of skulls, he covers himself with the ashes from the crematorium, right? That's how he's there. So then Lord Shiva explains, actually there's a history to this. He says this one time, there was this great demon named Namuchi. And this Namuchi, very interesting demon, he was a great devotee of Lord Vishnu. But when I say great devotee, he was devoted to Vishnu. But sometimes the devotees, because of their own past conditioning and the gunas, they may have a tamasic intention. What does tamasi bhakti mean? Tamasi bhakti or ignorant bhakti means where one is worshipping Lord Vishnu, but with the intention to destroy someone else. So Namuchi, he was doing that worship of Vishnu to destroy the devatas. So all the devatas, they approach Lord Vishnu saying, my Lord, he is empowered by your devotional service. Now we cannot defeat him, but look at him, he is after us. Please do something so that, these kind of tamasic people, they get disempowered by your bhakti, and somehow they still, so they think they are spiritual, but they are disempowered by your pure devotional service or the power of your devotion. So then Lord Vishnu immediately remembers Lord Shiva and requests his presence and says, Lord Shiva, I have a very, very special task for you. I want you to mislead the masses, especially these tamasic mentality people. I want you to mislead them by giving them a form of pseudo spirituality. It should look spiritual, but basically Lord Vishnu, what he's saying is, take them off my back. I don't want to handle these kind of tamasic people, right? So therefore Lord Shiva says, since that day I took up to this task of becoming the Bhutanam Pataye, of especially taking care of these kind of tamasic people. And therefore I started dressing like this, wearing these tamasic decorations like crematorium ash and the skull garland, etc., etc., right? And by doing all that, I'm trying to attract all those kind of tamasic mentality people, because their interest is not in devotion but in some materialistic gain. And if you see many in all the Puranic stories, practically all the great demons, they approached Lord Shiva for all the benedictions. They were all devotees of Lord Shiva. Not that it makes Lord Shiva bad, but the point here is that Lord Shiva plays a very, very special role, because only a very advanced devotee and truly detached person can take up to the service as Bhutanam Pataye. So Lord Shiva, he takes up the special service of distracting all these people, and therefore he says, I created so many bogus philosophies also. I inspired. So if you remember our 6 systems of philosophy, Padma Puran says that how the non-theistic systems of Vedic philosophy like Nyaya, Vaisheshika, the atheistic Sankhya, the Karma Mimamsa, even to a certain extent, the monoistic philosophy, the Advaita Vad, right? So all these philosophies, Lord Shiva says, I created them just so that people who are not interested in pure devotional service, but still have because an outright materialistic person, no problem. But sometimes people are not materialistic, but at the same time, they may not have the highest spiritual aspiration. Such people, Lord Shiva, he captures them. So is that a good thing or a bad thing? Well, very interesting conversation once Srila Prabhupada had with one of his students. So the student, he says, Prabhupada, I'm cultivating this particular life member, and he's a very devout person, very spiritually minded person, very sattvic, very pure in his lifestyle, and is a great devotee of Lord Shiva. His parents were devotees of Lord Shiva. His wife, very, very chaste lady, again, devotee of Lord Shiva. And he started reading some of your books also. And I gifted him, the 4th canto, 1st volume, because that's where this whole Daksha episode is covered, and Prabhupada beautifully glorifies Lord Shiva also there. I gave him this book, inspiring him to take up to Krishna consciousness. But in your book, he read this one statement that how Lord Krishna is pleased when his devotees are worshipped. And Lord Shiva, being the greatest devotee of Krishna, now he became even more convinced to worship only Lord Shiva. So Prabhupada just looked at him and says, that's all right. But the devotee was not convinced. But Prabhupada, he's not chanting Hare Krishna. He's still chanting Om Namah Shiva. He hasn't changed his lifestyle from that. He's still continuing his. Prabhupada still said, that's also fine. As long as he is convinced that Lord Shiva is the greatest devotee of Krishna, there is absolutely no problem, because Lord Shiva will personally come and guide him. Right? So many times we have this kind of and this, to me, this is a very powerful conversation that shows the broad-mindedness of spirituality, of a pure devotee, how they think. Many times we become so narrow-minded, we become so sectarian and cultish almost in our thought process, right? Because when you read the Vedas properly, you know, while there are, it seems like there are different paths and different divine personalities are glorified, but all these different paths, the Lord has created them to guide different souls according to their, there's a right medicine for the right patient. Recognizing that there cannot be just one pill that will, cure every medicine, every disease, right? So recognizing that different souls in this material world are suffering from different kinds of diseases, and therefore you need to offer a unique medicine. The Krishna created these different, modalities of spirituality, and sometimes when he glorifies the different personalities, right? So Lord Krishna, in fact, our acharyas, the Gaudiya Vaishnava acharyas, also beautifully they describe that even when words like Shiva, Rudra, all these special names of Lord Shiva also, when they are described, actually they are indirectly glorifying Krishna's unique qualities, because ultimately the harmonizing potency is coming from Krishna, the destruction potency is coming from Krishna, the all auspicious potency is coming from Krishna. So when Vaishnava looks at Lord Shiva, they are not interested in the power and the position that they carry, but they are only interested in the devotion that they carry. Therefore, there is no hesitation in worshipping Lord Shiva. In fact, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself, when he entered into before entering Jagannath Puri, right outside, it's connected to the word Bhutanam. So, Bhuvaneshwar is the place which is right outside Jagannath Puri, where this beautiful temple of Lord Shiva known as Lingaraj. Lord Chaitanya personally went there and he danced in the audience of Lord Shiva as Lingaraj. And the Gaudiya Vaishnavas, for them, Lord Shiva is Vaishwananam Yatha Shambhu. He is the greatest devotee. Therefore, there is absolutely nothing wrong when one approaches Lord Shiva with the intention that, oh Lord Shiva, give me the best thing that you can give me. Give me, what that is most dear to you. And then Lord Shiva will award you pure devotional service to Lord Krishna. But if you approach Lord Shiva for his position, give me some materialistic boons, or even liberation is also materialistic from that point of view, from the pure devotional service point of view. Liberation basically means I don't want to deal with the problems of this world. Save me from these problems, right? I want exemption from all these problems. That's what liberation means. That is in a sense, if you think about it, liberation is the highest form of selfishness, right? When you are only thinking about yourself, I don't want anything to do with this world. Just liberate me, right? So these are all selfish motives. So when one approaches Lord Shiva with such selfish motives, right, then not only that it violates the essence of the Vedic teachings, it displeases Lord Shiva also. Because as Bhutanam Pataye, as the supreme master of all the living entities, he wants every living entity to ultimately go back home, back to Godhead, and participate in the pastimes of the Lord, right? To be in the intimate association of Lord Krishna. So it even hurts Lord Shiva when somebody approaches him with materialistic and they think, oh my God, one more person has come to me. I have to again distract this fellow so that he doesn't disturb Lord Vishnu. He's like that gatekeeper, And also in Vrindavan, Lord Shiva has a very, very special form as Gopeshwar Mahadev. He is the guardian of the Rasasthali, the place where Lord Krishna performs his Ras Lila pastimes. Lord Shiva plays a role as a guardian, ensuring that only the qualified people can enter into these intimate pastimes of Lord Krishna. So that's a very, very unique. So if you want access to Vrindavan, if you want access to the spiritual world, we need to take permission and blessings from Lord Shiva. And on this very, very special day of Mahashivratri, this can be a very, very unique meditation. Trying to meditate on this 5 very, very unique qualities. How Lord Shiva is so special. how he is the perfect harmonizer, how he is the most ideal person, how he is the embodiment of Vidya, Vinaya, and Vairagya, and how he is the greatest altruistic person, right? So if you can meditate on these 5 unique qualities, right? So I don't know if you guys noticed it yet. Put all those 5 words together, you get Shiva, Shiva. So just meditate on this meaning of Lord Shiva, and that will be the perfection of our, of this special day of meditation on Lord Shiva. Thank you all so much. I'll end the discussion here. If there are any quick questions or comments anybody would want to ask, anybody wants to share something from their own personal experience, please feel free to do so. We roughly have around a couple of minutes. Maybe if you want to raise your hand, unmute yourself.
Right. I have a question.
Yes,
I was wondering, is Lord Shiva affected by the energy of this world, like?
Okay.
Or because you said that he's completely detached.
Correct. So, Sri Prabhupada explains in 1/4 canto purport that 99.99% Lord Shiva doesn't get affected. But because of the slight contact, sometimes Lord Shiva does get affected. Like, for example, when in that whole Daksha episode, when seeing that her husband was insulted, and later on Sati, she goes to the house of her father Daksha, and again she gets insulted there. Unable to bear that insult, Sati, she creates fire from within her own body and she immolates herself. And seeing the loss of his wife, Lord Shiva gets very angry. Now, anger may seem like, he gets affected there. Right? So in that purport, Prabhupada writes that sometimes, very, very rare exceptional cases, Lord Shiva, he likes to show that, it's as part of this world, we do get affected by it. So it's not actually a disqualification in Lord Shiva, but rather I like to look at it that how it's a qualification. It's a glorification of Lord Shiva, that he does act sometimes as a ordinary person of this world. So yes, so sometimes he does get affected by the energies of this world. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Okay, so
Hare
let's.
Krishna.
Yes, Hare Krishna.
I have one question.
Yeah.
Can we Lord Shiva is a great devotee of Krishna, and Brahmaji is also one of our acharyas. But we hear that in the spiritual world, Lord Shiva has his dham, but Brahmaji is here in the material world. So can we say that Brahmaji and Shivji are both on the same position since they are devotees of the Lord, or is there some distinction regarding to it?
Okay, so why Shiva has this very, very special position that way? Is that an elaboration of that question, that concept that we discussed?
Yes, and Brahmaji does not have his dham in the spiritual world, even though he's our acharya.
Right. So how these different tattvas are classified? Rupa Goswami in the Bhakti Samrita Sindhu explains how all these divine personalities, they exhibit certain unique characteristics. An ordinary jiva can exhibit at best 50 unique characteristics. The list of all those 50 characteristics also given. Maybe I can share the link later, but you can read up, right? And Brahmaji also exhibits maximum 50 characteristics. But whereas Lord Shiva, he exhibits more than that. He exhibits 55 unique characteristics. That's what makes him more than any other ordinary jiva, more than even Brahmaji himself. Lord Narayan, he exhibits up to 60 characteristics. And there are 4 unique characteristics that only Lord Krishna exhibits. So based on this, the different tattvas are categorized. So that's what makes Lord Shiva even higher, or you can say different from even Brahmaji, because Brahma at best he can exhibit only the highest characteristics that an ordinary jiva can do. In fact, the post of Brahma, again, a little technicality here, the creator is a post, and sometimes very, very, very pious souls can also take to that post of Brahma. That's why, and sometimes when you see, when Brahmaji falls down and he also does some, ordinary activities, right? It's referring to those kind of ordinary souls who have elevated to the position of Brahma. Just like how we can elevate higher, we can go to Swarga Loka, we can go to Jana, Maha, Tapa Lokas, can also go to Satya Loka, and then a soul can qualify himself to become a Brahma of that universe. But Shiva position is very, very unique. Only Sadashiva in the spiritual world, Sadashiva, eternal Shiva from the spiritual world, can expand into this material world as a Shiva, as that Adhipati, as a caretaker of this destruction potency. So that way, an ordinary soul cannot elevate themselves to the role of Shiva, but whereas they can elevate themselves to the role of Brahma. So that's another technical difference between the Shiva Tattva and Brahma.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So thank you so much. We'll end the discussion here and we'll resume our series with more passages from Bhagavatam next week. Hare Krishna.